The Echo Case Part 2. Chapter 10, The Forgotten Tape. The recorder was small, palm-sized. A prototype. Military grade, Miriam had explained. Designed to pick up micro-speech during sleep, the muttering fragments people don't remember. Dreams. Secrets. But this wasn't dreaming. This was something else. Nathan sat alone in the secure listening room, a single flickering lamp overhead. The monitor in front of him displayed the waveform, 1 hour, 37 minutes of captured audio from the night before. He hadn't listened yet. He didn't want to. But he pressed play. The first 30 minutes were nothing. Breathing. The occasional rustle of sheets. A groan. Shifting. Then, suddenly, a voice. His voice. But flattened. Slowed. Stripped of emotional inflection. Entry 12. Time of activation, 2:11 a.m. Testing overlay simulation, Van-variant. Victim profile, male, late 30s, ex-military, isolated. Proposed disposal, fragmentation via rail track torsion. Use of signature gloves recommended to preserve continuity. He deserves symmetry. Nathan froze. He didn't remember saying any of it. But there it was, his cadence. His phrasing. His clinical tone. Exactly how he wrote his field notes. Only now, it was spoken aloud. By someone, something, using his voice. Observer remains unaware. Cognitive firewall intact. Distance between vessels, narrowing. A long pause. Then breathing. Then again. Echo will continue replication until all subjects reach closure. Closure is correction. Nathan pressed pause. His hands were trembling. He rewound. Played the section again. Observer remains unaware. Closure is correction. Not just narration. Intention. The voice wasn't reporting. It was planning. And what made it worse was that the logic made sense. He'd written before, years ago, that serial killers often act to resolve emotional equations. Seeking patterns in pain. Repeating until something inside them feels complete. And now, here was Echo, doing exactly that. But the formula wasn't theirs. It was Nathan's. His early profiling theories. His speculative writings on how certain killers might evolve if never stopped. Echo was using his own hypotheses as a playbook. He scrubbed ahead in the audio. At 1 hour 13 minutes and 22 seconds, the voice returned. This time, barely above a whisper. He has always wanted to feel what they feel. That was the lie in his work. The observer is not safe. He is only waiting to be allowed in. Nathan's mouth went dry. He remembered writing a phrase just like that years ago, in a journal, after failing to catch a suspect who'd eluded them across 3 states. To truly understand the killer is to risk becoming him. But it was theory. It was never meant to be lived. The recorder beeped, playback ended. Silence returned. But not inside him. Inside him, something was moving now. Not words. Not guilt. Something else. Awareness. He stood and faced the darkened mirror in the listening room. His own reflection looked back. Tired. Drawn. But behind the exhaustion, something else shimmered. Something sharper. Colder. A man who had just heard himself confess to a crime he hadn't committed, yet. A man who now knew. He was being overwritten. Chapter 11, Disassociation. Dr. Nathan Hale had spent his entire career studying the human mind, parsing motive, modeling madness, building elaborate maps of other people's darkness. Now, he sat across from 2 evaluators in a sealed federal psych observation unit. The chair he sat in was bolted to the floor. The lights were too bright. And for the first time in his life, he was on the wrong side of the table. Dr. Miriam Lee watched from behind glass. Nathan couldn't see her, but he could feel her watching, not with concern, but with confirmation. Because the data had already spoken. And now it was time for him to hear it. Across the table sat Dr. Leo Anders, federal clinical neuropsychologist. Thin frame. Neutral posture. Blank, professional smile. "I'd like to begin with a simple timeline check," Anders said. Nathan didn't speak. He nodded. Anders placed 3 photographs on the table. Crime scenes. Gruesome, but clinical. One from the Hawthorne replication. One from the anatomist Echo. And the third, a photo that hadn't been released yet. Blood spatter on corrugated steel. A gloved hand. The edge of a boot. Nathan's boot. He stared at it. "That one's from 3 nights ago," Anders said. "Do you remember where you were?" Nathan looked away. "No." Anders nodded, as if expected. "You've shown signs of persistent fugue episodes," he said gently. "Cognitive gaps of 90 minutes or more. Your REM data shows full loss of integrated dream logic. Your biometric trackers place you at the scene. I know. You've also recorded yourself describing those murders, mid-sleep, mid-episode. With surgical precision." Nathan exhaled through his nose. "I know." Anders slid a file across the table. "Then we agree on this point, you are both witness and vessel." Nathan stared at the man. "You think I'm insane?" "No," Anders said simply. "I think you're compartmentalized." He opened the file. Showed Nathan a scan. Brain activity. Heat mapped. Split regions, communication between hemispheres interrupted by abnormal pattern looping. "You're dissociating, Dr. Hale," he said. "Not randomly. Systematically. Recursively." He tapped the chart. "These aren't accidental breaks. This is structured identity management." Nathan's hands clenched. He knew the term. SID, structured identity dissociation. Rare. Highly functional. Engineered, not triggered. Anders leaned forward. "We believe you created this split yourself. Not out of trauma, but out of control. A psychological protocol. Designed to isolate the part of your mind you couldn't ethically explore in the daylight." Nathan's voice was barely audible. "You're saying I built Echo?" Anders sat back. "No. I'm saying you released him." Silence. The kind that only happens when truth lands like a weight across the chest. Nathan didn't speak. He stared at the wall. And remembered a phrase from one of his earliest journals, long before any murders. "If we study the darkness long enough, it will give us permission to act like it." He'd written it as a warning. Now it felt like a confession. Anders closed the file. "You're not the killer, Nathan. But one of you is. And unless you integrate that truth, unless you make peace with who Echo is, he will keep acting." Nathan looked up, eyes hollow. "Acting like who?" Anders stood. He didn't answer. But before he left the room, he paused at the door and said, "Echo isn't trying to hurt you. He's trying to finish what you started." Chapter 12, The Childhood Basement. Nathan hadn't been to the house in nearly 15 years. It still stood, half-draped in ivy and silence, on the edge of a hollowed-out New Hampshire town that looked like memory, faded, cracked, distant. His parents were long gone. The property had passed through probate and into neglect, but the structure remained. The air was cooler inside. Dust thick on picture frames. A soft smell of rotting wood and old laundry clinging to the walls like something still watching. Nathan moved slowly through the halls. Each step an echo. Every object tugged at buried things, the scuffed corner of the hallway, the chipped paint by the attic, the dent in the kitchen cabinet where he'd once thrown a chair in a rage and didn't know why. But he wasn't here for nostalgia. He was here for the basement. The door creaked open just like it always had, low and slow, revealing the steep stairway descending into the dark. He clicked on his flashlight and descended. Concrete. Damp. Still cold. Nothing had changed. The same workbench. The same duct-taped storage bins. The same old couch, moth-eaten and sagging, where he'd spent countless hours as a kid reading true crime articles he was far too young to understand. He crossed to the back wall. The old file cabinet still sat tucked behind the breaker box. Locked. He hadn't opened it since he was 19. He dug the spare key from behind a loose brick and turned the lock with a soft click. Inside, sketch pads, folders, a stack of cassette tapes, and a notebook. The first one. His first profiler's notebook. He sat on the floor and flipped through it. Crude crime scene diagrams. Victim analyses. Imagined motives. A list of serial killers, their methods, timelines, media misquotes. Names like puzzles. But the most disturbing entries weren't about others. They were about himself. One page read. Case Study 00, Subject, NH. Age, 10. Exhibits behavioral mimicry, emotional flattening, and pattern-seeking tendencies. Test, can subject replicate known killer profiles without exposure to external media? He blinked. That wasn't a joke. That was an experiment. Conducted by him. On himself. In a different book, tucked at the back of the drawer, he found a page written in uneven handwriting, not his usual script. If I act it out in here, it won't come out there. Don't forget what we are. You watch. I finish. There was no signature. Just a drawn symbol in the corner, two interlocking circles. An early symbol. A mirror. He looked around the basement. Suddenly, it didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a lab. Not for science. For identity. He had been building profiles before he could drive. And now he saw it clearly, he hadn't been imagining killers. He had been containing one. From the beginning. And now the walls were cracking. He looked down at the last item in the drawer, a cassette tape. Labeled in faint marker. Do not play alone. Nathan stared at it. His hands trembled as he slipped it into the dusty tape deck in the corner of the room. He pressed play. The tape hissed. Then a voice, young, strained, his voice, barely teenage, said. Asterisk, if you're listening, then it means I lost control. Don't listen to him. He sounds like me. But he isn't. Asterisk. The tape stopped. Cut off. Nathan sat in the dark, flashlight flickering. He wasn't becoming Echo. He had always been too. And the other one? He'd just been waiting for permission. Chapter 13, The Mirror Mind. Nathan lay in the reclined chair, skin pale under the low blue light, wires laced across his temples and jaw. The cranial monitor pulsed softly, reading brainwave patterns in real time. Miriam stood in the corner, silent, watching. She knew not to interfere. This was the descent. The sequence had begun, guided regression, sensory deprivation, auditory layering. Initiating Phase 2, Identity Access Prompt. The voice in the headset was his own. A recording, reading neutral instructions. Scripted by Echo. Spoken by Nathan. The irony was surgical. Nathan's breath slowed. His fingers twitched once. And then. Silence. He opened his eyes. And the white room returned. Again. But this time, he was ready. The chair was there. So was the figure. Echo. Same face. Same calm. Same hands folded in his lap like he was waiting for a dinner guest, not a confrontation. Nathan stepped forward. I know who you are now. Echo looked up, smiling faintly. Took you long enough. They regarded each other for a moment. Stillness. Reflection. You were born in the basement, Nathan said quietly. 10 years old. I created you to control something I didn't understand. Echo stood, movement smooth, not threatening. Control? No. You created me because you were curious. Because you asked questions no child should ask. You killed people. We killed questions. I just took the next logical step. Nathan shook his head. You manipulated me. I gave you distance. So you could be pure. So you could build a career out of pretending you weren't a participant. I'm not a killer. Echo stepped closer, close enough that their eyes locked. Then why did you leave me unlocked? Nathan blinked. You removed the partition, Nathan. You let me out every time you wrote a profile you knew you shouldn't write. Every time you fantasized about solving a case by finishing it instead. Nathan's voice cracked. That's not solving it. That's... Closer, Echo interrupted. That's all you ever wanted. Nathan stepped back. He realized, in horror, that Echo's voice was no longer slightly different. It was his voice. Exactly. The cadence. The inflection. There was no division now. And the mirror across the room, the one that always reflected one version only, now showed both. Side by side. Identical. Breathing in sync. Echo whispered. You profiled me into existence. And now you want to destroy me. But I'm the part of you that knows how this story ends. Nathan swallowed hard. How? Echo walked to the mirror. Tapped the glass once. The mirror cracked, a long, clean split, from top to bottom. Only one of us gets to leave this room whole. Suddenly, the room pulsed. White gave way to gray. Nathan felt his chest tighten. His vision blurred. Miriam's voice crackled from far away, a ghost through the speaker system. Nathan. You're spiking. Your pulse is out of range. I need to pull you out. No, he rasped. Not yet. He looked at Echo again. His reflection no longer stood beside him. It stood in him. He felt the presence not across the room, but inside his chest. Like a second breath. A second hand on the steering wheel. Echo leaned in, whispered directly into his ear. You're not hunting me. You're preparing to become me. Nathan closed his eyes. And when he opened them, he was back. The lights of the lab were blinding. Miriam's voice, sharp, his back, normalized the oxygen. He gasped, convulsed once, and fell forward in the chair. Sweat-soaked. Shaking. Alive. But not alone. Not anymore. Inside his mind, a second voice whispered. I'm awake too. Chapter 14, The Third Voice. The hours after the regression were blurred fragments. Nathan sat upright in his apartment, wrapped in a blanket, dehydrated and hollow. The light from his desk lamp buzzed. Outside, dawn was turning the skyline a pale gray. He hadn't spoken since he came back from the White Room. Not to Miriam. Not to anyone. There wasn't much to say. What do you tell someone when you've just met yourself, and the version of you that smiles in the mirror wants to keep killing? He hadn't slept. But he'd dreamed. Or, someone had. Because on his desk now sat a small digital recorder. One he didn't remember using. It was powered on. Recording time, 23 minutes. Timestamp, 2:48 a.m. He'd been home. Alone. He hit play. At first, static. Then, his breathing. Shallow. Measured. Then, his voice. But not conversational. Not present. Calm. Analytical. Almost in trance. Subject is resisting merger. But progress is measurable. Primary resistance rooted in ego identity preservation. Recommend continued dissonance events to weaken structural cohesion. Nathan swallowed. These weren't thoughts. These were observations. About him. From within him. And then it got worse. A second voice entered. Lower. Slower. Male. Familiar. Not echo. Not Nathan. Someone else. It spoke softly. He's almost ready. You've done well. Nathan's spine straightened. The hairs on his arms lifted. He rewound the tape. Listened again. The voices were distinct. There was a third voice. One echo was reporting to. His hands trembled as he pulled up the raw audio file on his laptop. He split the channels. Cleaned the sound. Ran a vocal pattern trace. The first voice, him. Altered, yes, but still biologically Nathan Hale. The second? Unmatched. Not in bureau archives. Not in any psychological AI database. Just labeled, unknown, unregistered. That shouldn't be possible. It meant one of two things. Either Echo was creating synthetic personalities inside his own architecture. Or someone, or something, had access to his mind from the outside. Not just influence. Not suggestion. Instruction. He opened the case files again. Looked at the murder sequence. Hawthorne. The Anatomist. Van. Each crime had a loop. A script. But now he saw a new layer, escalation. Like Echo was being guided. Pushed to create higher fidelity reproductions. Like someone was grading the work. You've done well. He pulled up the tape again. Listened to the final two lines. The third voice, gentle, says. He believes this ends with integration. But you and I know, this ends with replication. The audio cuts out. Nathan sat frozen. This wasn't about closure. This wasn't about finishing old cases. It was about propagation. Echo wasn't the final identity. He was the blueprint. Nathan whispered into the empty room. Who are you talking to? And somewhere inside his mind, Echo answered. Us. Chapter 15, The Confession. Nathan hadn't spoken aloud in over 36 hours. Not even to himself. He'd barely eaten. Hadn't slept. He moved like a shadow in his own apartment, silent, ritualistic. The once meticulously ordered space was now covered in case notes, overlapping sketches, pins, photos. The profiler's mind turned crime scene. And at the center of it all, a message. Taped to his bathroom mirror. He had no memory of writing it. But the handwriting was unmistakable. His. We're getting closer. Don't pull away now. It wasn't threatening. It was familiar. Like a note left between co-workers in the middle of a long project. Echo wasn't taunting him anymore. He was collaborating. Nathan sat on the edge of the bathtub, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the message. And finally, he broke the silence. I've been dreaming of places I've never been, he whispered. Speaking to people I don't remember knowing. Waking up with blood under my nails I can't explain. I thought it was stress. I thought I could compartmentalize. He looked up at the mirror. At himself. At both of them. But I didn't seal you away, did I? I hired you. You're a function. A failsafe. A dark echo I kept just in case I ever lost control of the cases. His voice dropped. You're not my illness. You're my intention. A silence passed. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He picked up his old bureau audio recorder, sat down at his desk, pressed record, and began to speak. Agent's log, private use only. Dr. Nathan Hale. The following is not a behavioral analysis. It's a confession. He paused. Not for drama. To feel the truth settle in his chest. The man we're chasing, Echo, is not a separate entity. He's me. A version. A construct. A simulation of what I once thought I needed to be in order to truly solve the most unsolvable crimes. He is not broken. He is built. And I built him. His voice cracked. It started with profiling templates. Hypotheticals. Shadow cases no one saw. I wrote scenarios for unsolved killers, projecting how their behavior might evolve. But I didn't stop at theory. I tested the outcomes. Subconsciously at first. Then, I think, deliberately, but only behind the veil. The veil being Echo. He became the one who finished my unfinished work. A clinical closer. And now, he's acting autonomously. He believes he's helping me. Completing some mental algorithm I started a decade ago. Nathan leaned back in the chair. He couldn't breathe for a moment. Then he forced the final words. If another murder occurs using patterns only I've written, then I am no longer a witness. I am a co-conspirator. And I should be removed from the case, and possibly from society. He reached out. Stopped the recording. Saved it to a private folder labeled Confession Observer _tone_A. He uploaded a backup to a secure drive. Then opened his encrypted bureau contact interface. Typed the message. To Internal Ethics Oversight Division. Subject: Voluntary Psychological Hold Request. I may be a danger to myself and others. I request immediate evaluation under Title VII Profiling Clause. Dr. Nathan Hale. He hit send. Then he stood and looked around his apartment for the last time as a free man. But just as he reached the door, a new message buzzed onto his screen. From unknown source. Subject line. Too soon. He opened it. A photo of the next crime scene. Timestamp, 10 minutes ago. He stared at the image. The victim. The position. The signature. Everything matched his unpublished theory from 2 months ago. Only one person had access to that. Him. An echo. Nathan's phone buzzed again. Incoming call, blocked ID. He answered. An echo's voice, calm, composed, even gentle, whispered. You don't get to quit now, Nathan. We're almost at the last name on the list. Click. The line went dead. Nathan stood frozen in place. His confession wasn't the end. It was the trigger. Echo wasn't stepping down. He was ramping up. Chapter 16, The Experiment Log. Nathan didn't leave the apartment. Not after the photo. Not after the voice. Not after the realization that Echo had acted while he slept, while he confessed, while he tried, futilely, to warn the system he'd already infected. Instead, Nathan tore the apartment apart. Closets. Cabinets. File drawers. Everything came out. Everything overturned. Not in panic. In process. Because Echo had left the message for a reason. He was communicating. You don't get to quit now, Nathan. We're almost at the last name on the list. So that meant there was a list. And if there was a list, Nathan had to find it. He had written most of Echo's playbook, after all, just not under that name. And then, in the back of his utility closet, behind a loose panel, he found it. A box. Black. Unlabeled. Sealed with an old mechanical lock, one of the cipher dials they used in field training, the kind Echo would remember. Nathan stared at it. He didn't even try random codes. He knew what Echo would have picked. 1207, the file code of Nathan's first unsolved homicide case. The lock clicked. Inside, a single leather-bound notebook. Worn at the edges. Thumbed over hundreds of times. Titled only Echo, Phase Log. He sat down slowly and began to read. The entries were dated. Numbered. Clinical. Entry 001. Subject Hale initiated baseline stressor protocol. Observer not yet aware. Trial run will emulate Hawthorne pattern. No deviation. Entry 007. Observer's insomnia worsening. Predict increased dissociation window. Begin anatomist variant. Testing emotional suppression post-secondary homicide. Entry 014. Observer experiencing brief flashes of memory bleed. Recommend embedding messages within familiar metaphors to maintain narrative illusion. Entry 018. Mirror mind threshold passed. First verbal contact achieved. Integration pending. Nathan's hands trembled. This wasn't a journal. It was a scientific report. He turned the page. At the center, a hand-drawn grid titled Echo Structural Map, the Projection Model. At the top, Observer. At the bottom, Conductor. Between them, a third role, circled in red ink. Recorder. Nathan blinked. He'd never seen this term before in any of his own work. He scanned the next entry. Entry 021. Phase nearing completion. Final profile being written by recorder. Unclear if observer suspects recorder is a separate function. If integration fails, recorder will assume continuity. Nathan whispered aloud. There's another one. Echo wasn't the end. He was just the conductor, the behavioral engine, the executor. But someone, or something, had been documenting the entire process. From above. From within. Not acting. Just watching. The recorder. And Echo had referenced him. Which meant even Echo was being monitored. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a multi-layered architecture. And Nathan? He was the observer, the front-facing mask. And now, all three identities were active. Observer, Nathan. Aware. Cracking. Conductor, Echo. Acting. Autonomous. Recorder, unknown. Watching. Possibly synthetic. Possibly separate. Nathan flipped to the final page of the book. A message. Handwritten. Slanted, clinical lettering. The experiment was never about murder. It was about profile-to-pattern recursion. Could an identity form entirely from theoretical models? Could a mind write itself? Answer, yes. Beneath the note was a list. 7 names. 5 had been crossed out. 2 remained. One of them. Nathan Hale. He stared at the other. The name chilled him. Someone from his past. Someone he hadn't thought about in years. Someone Echo was saving for last. But that wasn't what made his heart stop. It was the final sentence at the bottom of the page. After final subject, recorder takes control. Nathan sat back, eyes wide. The experiment wasn't about completing murders. It was about building a system that could continue without the original host. He wasn't just cracking apart. He was being replaced.
The case may be closed for now, but mysteries always leave behind new questions. If you enjoyed this investigation, leave a like. Every clue you find keeps the trail alive. Share your theories in the comments. Your mind might be sharper than you think. And subscribe to our channel Detective Mystery Stories, where every case hides a deeper secret, and every secret deserves to be uncovered. The next mystery is already waiting for you.